Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, November the 6th, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. This is the K-Beams Ambulance Grant Training. I'll turn it over to Mr. Mike Pointer for an introduction.
Hey, thanks, Drew, and thanks everybody for taking time out to meet with us this morning. I just want to give you just a little bit of background on why we're doing this. Last year, I requested a business audit for our operations, just not because there were any issues, but because if there's a better way to streamline operations and be more effective, that was our goal. So we had an auditor come in and he suggested a few new ideas and procedures and policies on how we administer the grant, and we're trying to uh, put those into place. Basically, be accountable on our end, but also be responsible for your time and effort, and to help you in any way we can to make sure this ambulance grant finances are dispersed. Let me, clearly say that, we want you to have this money. We're not trying to hold back anything. We're very transparent about that, but we are accountable and responsible for proper procedures. So what we've done, and Drew spent a lot of time on this, is to simplify the way we apply for the ambulance grant funds. So hopefully this will be better. I know we've had a few cases this year where we had some complications, but hopefully after this procedure is in place and the new website layout is in place, this will make it much easier for you, the provider, to accomplish this task. So thanks again for being here, and we're here. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. So Drew, I'll turn it back over to you.
We're going to spend the rest of our hour going over the location and an overview of the grant webpage on the K-Beams site. We're going to go through an explanation of the timeline, documentation requirements, and reemphasize all the deadlines. Then we're going to go into the location of the G1 county application, the substitute W-9 that's used with KCTCS for the direct deposit of awarded funds, and a detailed instructional document. Finally, we'll go through a demonstration of the application in KEMSIS so you can see it firsthand, and we'll wrap up with any questions that are entered into the chat. So at this time, I'd like to make everybody aware that Deputy Executive Director Chuck O'Neill and Financial Analyst Janet Sweeney from the K-Beams office are also on the line, and they'll be taking some of your questions as I go through this presentation, and they'll also help if there's a question that I can't answer. Everything that we're going to talk about today is located on the grant page of the K-Beams website. Most of you, as ambulance service administrators, should be familiar with the general layout of the K-Beams site at this time, but the easiest way to get to our site is kyems.com, or you can use your bookmarks or favorites. We have a banner scrolling through this top section of our page, and one of the buttons is some $100 bills, and there's a link to get to the grants page, and you can just click that read more. You also have the option of going to the agency operations section and then selecting the grants from that left-hand navigation. For the purposes today, I'll just use the handy link that's right on the front page. This section of the website is dedicated to everything on the K-Beams grant. First thing I want to point out right at the beginning is the deadline to apply is January 31st, 2021. Everything has to be turned in by that date. Effective midnight, any incomplete applications get archived, and of course, no new applications can be started after January the 31st. So what does your county need to do? You need to ensure that your fiscal court, or in the case of Fayette and Jefferson, your metro government, has completed the 21-22 county application, which is referred to the G1, because you have to attach it in KEMSIS to the agency application, the G2. The link to the G1 will cover, but everything that you'll need that's not on this page is linked in this gold box off to the right. The next thing that you need to do is ensure that your fiscal court or your metro government has completed and provided you with a copy of the substitute W-9 form. Now, they can't use the standard IRS W-9. You have to use the KCTCS substitute W-9, which is linked in the gold box. Direct deposit is the only way for the disbursement of funds. Now, what does the agency need to do? And this is where the bulk of the activity will occur, and that is through submission of the G2 before the January 31st deadline and submission of the G4 before the January 31st deadline. Now, one thing that we've done this year that is a little bit different is we have combined both the G2 and the G4 into the same KEMSIS application. In years prior, there were two different applications that would be filled out. Last year, we did a combined application but separate forms, and now everything is in the same application and the same form, which is a format and layout that is similar to what you would interact with KEMSIS today for anything from adding a vehicle to the agency license or renewing the service license. Within the G2, you're going to upload copies of quotes if you have those. That's where you'll list the items that you want to purchase. You'll do the narrative, and you'll also upload the G1 that you have scanned that has the judge's or the urban county government mayor's signature. And you'll also upload the substitute W-9. In the G4, you'll be required to attach the documentation such as your receipts or other proof of purchase for the grant period that occurred not this current year, but for the year prior, fiscal year 19 to 20. If you need to change what you originally applied for in your G2 after the January 31st submission timeline, you'll request that substitute item on a G3 by May the 31st. And after that point, everything that you had applied for will be locked in. The overall timeline for this grant program is depicted in this illustration, but October, the grant applications opened, so that occurred last week. By January the 31st, you'll have to get the G2 uploaded to the you'll have to get the G1 uploaded to the G2 application in KEMSIS. You'll upload your receipts into the G4 screen. We anticipate doing the notifications on July 1st or shortly thereafter, and then distribute the funds before the end of August. And so this timeline on the left starts October 1st and then runs through October 31st to 22. So there's actually the current grant timeline and extending into next year's grant, just so you can begin planning accordingly. In terms of items, we've not changed anything. If it's on FEMA's authorized equipment list, it should be good. If you have specific questions or you're unsure, it's always better to ask before, and you can do that through the support portal. Also want to mention that if you have questions, don't wait to submit those to us the last 2 weeks of December, because we will be observing that institutional closing around the holidays. And then when we come back in January, we want you to have all the information so that you aren't running right up to the January 31st timeline. It'll be better if you want any feedback on your grant application to do it sooner than later. Obviously, because those applications begin to pile up the closer we get to the January 31st submission deadline. I'll go back up to the top of the page here, and I want to draw your attention to this gold box. So the first link is for detailed KEMSIS instructions. Now, when I click on this, it'll open in a new tab, but we have gone to great lengths to develop a click-by-click set of instructions that will walk even the newest KEMSIS user through filling out this grant application. And I would encourage you to go to the KBeams website now and use this document to follow along as I use our test account to walk you through the grant application here in a few minutes. The G1 is the county application. This is the document that will be completed by the county judge in coordination with possibly the treasurer or the mayor in the case of the urban county governments. And just caution you to coordinate the requested amount if there's more than one eligible agency in your jurisdiction, and make sure that this is all filled out. This is a point of failure for some applications, that this is filled out and then it maybe has the ambulance director's signature and not the judge or the mayor. If anybody other than the judge is signing this document, there really ought to be something on letterhead that's authorizing that other individual to sign on behalf of the county. We can't take for granted that somebody had the judge's permission to sign this, obligating the county to the work that's being done on this document and described in further detail in the G2. So take your time, do this the right way the first time, because it will alleviate any frustration or need to redo it down the road. And so again, you can get to that G1 right from this gold box. The third link is the substitute W-9 form. We do require, and it's not even we KBeams, it's KCTCS who actually issues the payments, requires the KCTCS substitute W-9, not the generic IRS form. So you're going to get likely your treasurer to fill this out to make sure that we have an up-to-date copy, and you will also attach this to the G2 in KEMSIS. The third link is FEMA's authorized equipment list site. If you're not sure what you want to use the grant money for, you can get some inspiration from this. Based off prior purchases, the items don't vary a whole lot from year to year, but we would ask that if you're buying something that you're not sure about, check this list and then check with us. It's okay to ask questions, and you can do that through the support portal. The next link is the KEMSIS login, and then the final link is for the KBeams support portal. Many of you have interacted with both of these systems. So again, at this point, I would ask that you, if you've not already, to pull up this detailed KEMSIS instructions document, and you can follow along as I log into KEMSIS and fill out an example application for the demonstration today. All right, once you're logged into KEMSIS, you'll go to Applications. If you have access to multiple services, you'll see those listed here. If you do not have any services listed, that means you don't have the appropriate permissions to apply for the grant, and you should talk with service leadership to see about getting that level of permission in KEMSIS. So I'll go to Service Applications for our test agency, and I will go to the ambulance grant funding for fiscal year 21-22 and the G4 for 19-20. In this application description, it does describe the dates, the deadline, the required attachments, and there's also a countdown until the period closes. So to get started, we'll click Apply Now. Now you'll notice here at the top of the screen, we've got our cover page just with the subsection instructions. Then we've got a tab for the G2. We have a tab for the G4, and then we have the Terms and Submission tab. The layout of the application is consistent with the forms from the prior years, and the navigation is consistent with the way agencies are familiar with interacting with KEMSIS in recent years. So at this point, I'm on step 6 of that instructional document. Mostly for the demographic section, you're just going to verify that we have everything up to date. If there's a different point of contact for the grant, you can list that individual's name in this section, or you could just list the director. And the bottom of each page contains controls for save and also save and continue. In this case, I'll click save and continue, and KEMSIS will navigate us to the G2 tab here at the top. Again, the timelines with this grant application are very critical. Everything has to be submitted by January 31st, and the application period that you are applying for is July 1st of 21 through June 30th of 22. So these funds that you're applying for now, if funded, will be done next summer. That's not the money that you have received recently. This is money for next calendar year and also next fiscal year. So we'll acknowledge that we understand the submission of this form in KEMSIS is no later than January 31st. And then this is the item details. So this is where we'll describe what we want to purchase. So I want to purchase one remount fee. Item cost is $10,000. And because it's only one, we'll do $10,000. Now let's say we didn't want to do putting the application amount just for the cost towards an ambulance. We could do 10 backboards at $100 a piece. And so that would be $1,000. And then we could add another item, and it's going to create this table view of the items that you want to purchase. So we can do 10 video, and let's just say for the sake of simple math, those are $900 a piece. So that would be 9,000. And now we have a table. So 10 at 100 equals 1,000, and 10 at 900 equals 9,000. So the total cost of all items is what goes in this box. So there's our $10,000 grant. The next question is, have you combined or do you plan to combine funds? The combining is allowing you, if you want to use the funds that were recently awarded and next year's awards to do a purchase of a larger scale. In a lot of cases, you would do no combining. But if you do need to combine funds, you would indicate that here. The next section of the G2 is the narrative. Now, I would encourage you, because KEMSIS doesn't have spell check, to work on your narrative in your email client or Microsoft Word or a Google Doc file, run spell check on it, and then copy and paste that into this box, rather than spend a significant amount of time here only to learn that maybe it didn't save, maybe it had some typographical or grammatical errors in it that makes it a little bit more difficult to review. You know, avoid using bullet points, because this is not a full what you see is what you get editor. You don't have to be too wordy with this narrative. Just tell us what you're trying to accomplish so that KBeams, the officials reviewing the grant application, the auditor, or any third party who's unfamiliar with your project at a high level knows what you're trying to do. describe the problem that you're trying to solve. And so you don't have to be overly wordy. The competitive nature of this grant is not like you would see with a Homeland Security grant, for example. All right. The next section is where you will attach your G1 and your substitute W-9. Now, hopefully, by now, you've already got those documents completed, you've gathered the necessary signatures, and you've scanned those to a PDF, and they're sitting on your computer, maybe in a folder on your desktop, and they're ready to upload. So I've got a test data file that I'm going to grab from my desktop. And I'm going to add that here, and I'm going to call this the G1 signed. And I'm going to go to the substitute W-9. If you didn't catch on to that, I'll describe this in a little more detail. Click the upload file. That'll bring up a little dialog box where you can choose the file on your desktop. So you can, depending on your computer, your folders will probably look different than mine. So I've saved my attachment to the desktop. I'll select that and then click Save to upload it, and then I can give the file a name. We've already got the document types identified as ambulance grant, so that'll make it easier for us to see on the back end as your application is reviewed. So you have the option again at the bottom of the page to click Save, and then you can navigate around, and so you can go back if you want to check the cover and just review your work as you go along. At this point, I'm ready to move on to the G4, and I'll get there by clicking Save and Continue. We're now on step 12 of the instructional document, if you're following along. Similar to the G2, we've described again the submission deadlines, and we've gone on to highlight the G4 accountability of funds is for the period July 1 of 19 through June 30th of 20. This past year, we had a pretty significant volume of applications that came in, and they uploaded current year receipts. So there's actually 3 periods in play with this grant program. There's the program or the period that just got completed. There's the period that you're doing now, and there's the period that you're applying for next year. So the receipts that are expected on the G4 are from the work that you did during July 1 of 19 through June 30th of 20. We do not want receipts dated between July 1st, 20 and January 31st, because obviously you can't do a future purchase in May of 2021, for example. Again, you'll have to select this G4 acknowledgement, and then we'll get into the proof of the expenditure of funds. And again, because these dates are very, there's a lot of dates flying around. So we've gone in and described again that we want purchased item receipts from July 1st of 19 through June 30th of 20. So section 1, proof of expenditure of funds. We need receipts for July 1 of 19 through June 30th of 20. So if you're not sure, go back and look at your G2 for that same period. Again, there's 3 timelines for the grant program. There's the work from the prior year that's been done. There's the work in the current year that you're doing now, and you're applying for the future year. The first question in this section is, did the county have any grant expenditures for the period July 1, 19 through June 30th, 20? In almost all cases, we're going to say yes. The next question is, did the county carry over and combine funds with another period? So we'll say no. And then we'll enter the item quantity. So let's say 2 years ago, we just bought 10 cots, and they were $1,000 a piece. So that was $10,000 for our purchase. Now, again, the table can be built here if you bought more than one type of item, but it doesn't have to. Maybe you just did the one item. Maybe it was putting it towards the cost of a vehicle or a monitor. So then we'll enter the total cost of all items in that box. Now, if you didn't have a grant expenditure and answered this question no, these questions change a little bit differently. In other words, you're not going to be prompted to enter item quantities because you said that you didn't have any expenditures, and that's okay. So I just want to call out, if you answer this question no, and you don't see these, it's because you didn't have any purchases. So there's nothing to document in this section, and it's hidden in plain sight. The next section of the G4 is the proof of the availability of funds. So if there were any carryover funds, the applicant must submit proof to our office about those funds being available. Now, the best example that we can give you would be a letter from the treasurer saying that those funds are available. So what you would do is you would come in, was the county or the agency awarded any funds for the period July 1st, 19 through June 30th, 20? And we would say yes. And this is saying that you understand that the expenditures must match the actual items that were on the original grant application or the G3. So you'll have to mark this yes, and this is where you'll upload either your receipts, or if you were doing combining, you would upload that letter from the treasurer or other substantial proof that that grant money is available for this current grant year period. So I'll go back to my desktop by clicking the upload file. I'll choose, select test data, and save. And we'll just call it letter from treasurer. Now this upload allows for multiple files. So if we had maybe a letter from the treasurer and a purchase receipt from a partial project, there's a couple different scenarios, but we understand that that's the case. So you may need to upload multiple files, or if you have a file that's very large, you may need to scan 2 PDFs. So this G4 section will allow for multiple upload of files. If your agency did not receive any funds, there's a scenario where maybe it's a new agency, newly licensed, or there was some other cause that an agency was ineligible for funds. You could mark this answer no, and then explain why no funds were awarded. And that's okay. There are scenarios there you may not have been participating in the grant or otherwise ineligible. So just remind us what that circumstance was so that it's documented and that your grant application will be complete from that point. So I'm going to toggle this back over to yes, because we did get funds. So we've still got our attachment there. And at this point, I'll click Save and Continue. Now the last page of KEMSIS, if you're still following along on the instructions, we're at step 14 now on the Terms and Submission tab. These are the terms and submissions. It goes over all the deadlines again. It states that we'll make every attempt to distribute the funds via direct deposit by August 31st of 2021. And then we've got the standard language in here that whoever's filling out the application will keep their KEMSIS profile up to date, and they agree not to knowingly falsify any records. So I'll type in my password and I'll click Submit. Now, if you've got multiple scanned documents that are sizable, it might take the submission a little bit longer than normal than an application just did for me. and it'll come up and say pending review interim, and that's because the system is still processing those uploaded documents. Within a few minutes, you will receive an email confirmation that your application was submitted successfully, and there'll be copies of everything. So you'll get a PDF copy of your completed grant application that you can save to your computer or print out and stick in your grants folder, or give a copy of that to the county treasurer for them to have on file. Whatever your process is, you will get a copy of that grant application for archival. And then at that point, your application will be in pending review until such time as our staff begins to process those grant applications. And this concludes the submission portion of our presentation today for the grant training. So that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is questions. And so I will go ahead and open it up. If anybody has any questions for Mr. O'Neill or Ms. Sweeney or Mr. Pointer or myself, we'll be glad to take those at this time. So the first question has come in from Charles Cremines. If my application for the last grant cycle was denied, I didn't receive any funds for this year, I should select no on the G4 section.
The G4 form that was illustrated is related to the dates that were specified at the top, the 1920 cycle. So it's not related to this past year. You have to go back to that grant cycle, and if you received the funds or awarded funds for your G2, it was the 19th, 20th.
Yeah, so again, this question comes back to the three different grant years. There's the 1920, which was last year. There's the 2021, which is the year that we're in now. And there's the future year, the 21-22. For this application period, he would not answer that question no, unless he didn't receive funds in 1920. Next year's grant application would be when the G4 is indicated as no funding. The next question is from Keith Sanders, and Keith says, can funds still be used for ePCR software?
Sure, I'm looking it up right now, Keith, in the 540. I'm sorry, it's not the 540, it's the, I've already opened it, it's the 520. So what you're going to look at is the 202 KR 7520 administrative regulation. That's what I'm looking up right now. So it'll talk about eligible expenses. These changed about 2 years ago because we used to have the we had the tiering schedule, and we wanted to eliminate that to make things easier for everyone. So this is the 520 under the KBEMS website. So section 1's eligibility to receive grant funding. We're looking for allowable expenditures. Application requirements is section 2. Section 3 is application for change. That's a G3 normally. Allowable expenditures. So here we go. So awarded funds shall only be expended on authorized purchases. Authorized purchases include ambulances, equipment, training, services, or other items necessary for the agencies or its personnel to meet the minimum requirements of 202 KR 7501, EMS-related educational tools, EMS-related continuing education registrations, and items on the Department of Homeland Security AEL. So, Keith, I think the answer to your question is this talks about ambulances, equipment, training, services, or other items necessary for the agency or its personnel to meet the minimum requirements of 202 KR 7501, which are your ambulance requirements. Part of that is your mandated documentation and data submission. So I'll let Mike research this a little bit more. He's going to be taking care of this side of the house on the grant authorization of purchases going forward. But in my opinion, this speaks specifically to 202 KR 7501. But I think if we look through the ground ambulance regulations, which there's actually like 3 of them now that have been changed since this regulation was changed, I think your ambulance's equipment or other items necessary for the agency is going to shoot you actually over to the 540 data reg for data submission requirements, as well as documentation requirements under 501. So the short answer is yes, I believe that your software expenses could be eligible.
And I would agree with that, Chuck. I've done some research on that, and I believe that would fall into that category.
The next question is from Rick Luperfido, and he asks, can funds be utilized for medical equipment service contracts? I think based on the conversation that we just had, that that particular service to maintain the required equipment would fall under an eligible expense. Do you gentlemen tend to agree?
Yeah, I do, Drew. I think that's correct. We're the agencies are required to show proof that preventative maintenance has been conducted on the clinical equipment, stretchers, all those types of things. So I think that would be an allowable expense.
Thank you. The next question comes from Scott Helly. If there is more than one ambulance service in a county, does each service submit an application, and do they receive the full amount, or is it split between them?
I can take this one too, Drew. So for Scott, we've got several counties that are like that. So the ambulance services, each ambulance service has to complete a G2 and a G4, and they all have to submit a G1 as well. So funds are not awarded to ambulance services. They're awarded to county or metro governments, and then the county or metro government distributes those funds to the ambulance services in accordance with law and whatever their distribution schedule is. Some counties or metro governments distribute funds evenly among services. Some of them rotate years. But in the event that an agency within a county with multiple services wants to be an applicant for the award, they have to complete all the same information, the G1, G2, and G4.
And so we will add a link to the gold box on the grant page that goes to the regulation, so that way it's a little bit easier to find. We've had another question here from Rick. Is the maximum amount of the grant $10,000?
At this current time, that is what the board has agreed to. So yes, it's $10,000 per county.
We did have another question come in from Keith Sanders. Does equipment have to be new, or can it be refurbished?
The regulation doesn't state that any of the equipment has to be new, so it can be new or used or refurbished. That applies to equipment, that applies to ambulances, etc. There was previous regulation several years ago that said that everything had to be new. We eliminated that information because so many people are doing remounts and purchasing used ambulances, reconditioned monitors, things like that. So the regulation does not state that the equipment or ambulances have to be new. So the answer would be no, it doesn't have to be new. It can be refurbished or used.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the queue, so we'll go ahead and stop the recording here. I'd like to thank you for your attendance today.